This episode is presented by Prize Picks. Be sure to visit prizepicks.com or use the app today. And be sure to use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match when you sign up.
All right, we are back. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another episode, guys, and we are chugging right along in our positional breakdown series. We've already talked about the quarterbacks, already talked about the running backs, and now we find ourselves at the wide receiver position. Before we get into this one, guys, if you haven't checked out our other two videos on the different position groups, be sure to go do that. But Derek, this is one that definitely I feel like we're going to be able to talk about a lot of different players here. By far, out of the three that we have done now, this is the most amount of players that we are going to talk about for sure, because there's a lot more wide receivers that are going to make the roster probably than just about any other position on the offense, probably outside of the offensive line. So with that being said, Derek, this is a wide receiver room that has a lot of talent in it. Before we kind of dive into some of that individual talent, this is a position the Colts have pretty heavily invested in, draft-wise when it comes to getting these guys. I mean, multiple second-round picks the Indianapolis Colts have invested now into this wide receiver room, and then the third-round pick in Josh Downs as well. So the Indianapolis Colts certainly have done their fair share of investment in pretty fairly early picks for their wide receivers. So, man, talk to me about just this, as a whole, this wide receiver core for the Indianapolis Colts.
You're right. Extremely young. I believe the oldest wide receiver on the roster that you would predict to make the roster is Ashton Doolin, and he's 27 years old. I mean, that's insane. I mean, this is we give Chris Ballard a lot of crap for the defensive end group because, again, Ballard has invested a lot of draft capital into making that group younger and trying to get more explosive. And, that criticism was warranted because, we've seen him try to do it, but, we haven't seen him succeed in drafting a wide receiver or drafting defensive ends yet that have produced at an elite level right now. But I would say for the wide receiver group, while it may not 100% be exactly where you want it to be, there is a lot more optimism for this wide receiver room than maybe some other positions in which the Indianapolis Colts are insanely young at. You talk about Josh Downs and what we saw in year one and what he could potentially be. Adonai Mitchell, who you drafted this year, you obviously expect big things out of him. Michael Pittman, still a great wide receiver. And there's a couple other dark horses in this wide receiver group as well. So, there's at least some high optimism about the youth of this position and what it can eventually become with Anthony Richardson as the quarterback and Shane Steichen as the mastermind of the offense.
Yeah, you're right. When you look at the wide receiver room, really guys that you expect to get really any sort of looks on the offensive side of things, like significant snaps. I mean, the oldest guy is Michael Pittman Jr., and he's only 26 years old. So that is the high bar in terms of age for the wide receivers that you think will make an impact on this team. So certainly a very young but yet very talented wide receiver room that I think need to even prove. They showed some things last year, but even need to build off of that and continue to improve here in 2024. So with that, we got to start with, the wide receiver out of the Indianapolis Colts that has been the most consistent over the past number of years. And now I know a lot of these guys weren't here a couple years ago, but Michael Pittman Jr., he's kind of been through it all, Derek. He's seen some good. He's seen some bad when it comes to the quarterback play. Yet this guy consistently has stayed very, very consistent for the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, the dude last year set career highs, in pretty much every category, targets, receptions, yards. I mean, this dude was just doing a little bit of everything for the Indianapolis Colts. And I felt like, Derek, we saw him take kind of another step in his game in 2023, despite the fact that, him and AR barely got any time together on the field. Michael Pittman Jr. just continued to be that reliable wide receiver, that can make some plays. And I honestly thought, Derek, that he showed a little bit more than we've seen in the past, right? He showed some ability down the field. He showed some ability after the catch to make some things, even though you look at, some of those other stats. And I think this is one of those times where the stats are a little bit misleading just because, Michael Pittman Jr. didn't get a lot of looks down the field. And, for some of the looks he did get, he did break a couple. So, not the fastest wide receiver in the NFL. He's not a burner, but Michael Pittman Jr. is probably as reliable as they come when it comes to wide receivers. So talk to me about Pitt and just what he provides stability-wise and just as that projected number one wide receiver for the Colts here going into 2024.
Well, I mean, you saw last year, he was the heartline of the offense. I mean, you saw when Pittman was not actively involved in the offensive game plan, the offense struggled. It wasn't able to run the ball as effectively, and especially passing-wise, you didn't really get a lot of great plays from anyone else besides Michael Pittman. Now, obviously, again, Josh Downs had great plays here and there, but Josh Downs was never asked to really carry the offense at any point. And with Alec Pierce and the majority of his game being more of a vertical threat, that was limited in his usage based off of what we saw from Gardner Minshew. So, Pittman had to be the every drive, you had to hit this guy a couple times to be able to get those first downs, to get those catches that helped move the chains. Without Michael Pittman last year, this offense, I wouldn't say it would have went back to 2022, but it would have been pretty dang close if Michael Pittman was not a part of this offense. I mean, you saw the few times in which Michael Pittman was not out on the field. I mean, the team forgot how to play offense. I mean, sincerely, nobody else could step up. Now, again, with the fact that every weapon you have on this team right now is pretty much a young player, there's only a few players on this offense that you can actually sit there and say, this guy can help take over the game. And, for an offensive perspective, and that's pretty much Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor. Now, obviously, last year, Jonathan Taylor was also dealing with a little bit of injury here and there. So when you had a situation where if him or Pittman are not available, the offense suffers massively. So, I mean, it was huge for the Indianapolis Colts to bring a guy in, to bring him back and, be able to get the guy that's going to get you 100 receptions. I mean, there's not a lot of wide receivers in the league that can handle and be able to elevate off a 100 reception year. I mean, only about 25, 30 wide receivers in the NFL are capable of such a feat. And half the time they don't. So, but what's been great about Michael Pittman has been, from the first year on, you have seen this guy continue to get better. 2020, it wasn't great for a start of the year for him, but he was able to show some promise in his rookie season. And then that second year, with Carson Wentz, you started seeing him highball. We saw him be the wide receiver at USC that we remember from the draft. So we've seen that and we thought, oh, this guy's a baller. And then in 2022, obviously the numbers were very much down because of just how the offense was. But even then, still 99 receptions and almost 1,000 yards. And then obviously this year, and an offense that was kind of limited because of injuries and also who the quarterback was still able to have a career year. So Michael Pittman is primed for a big one, like a bigger one. And I think he can have a better season than even this. I think that 110 receptions is definitely a number that he should be striving to get every year. And, trying to get more than just 1,150 yards. I think more along the lines of 1,300, maybe 1,400 more in the books, with maybe a few extra touchdowns here and there. And then we start talking about Michael Pittman being amongst the elite of the elite wide receivers that are in the NFL. So Michael Pittman, he is a consistently great weapon, and it's great to have him here. The only thing that's slowing him down is who's throwing in the football right now.
Well, that's what I was going to say was, really outside of 2021, Michael Pittman Jr.'s never had a quarterback that has thrown the ball down the field consistently. Like, he's never even had that. And even Carson Wentz, like near the end of the year, didn't do that anymore. They started like tapering him back a little bit, didn't make him throw a lot. So, like, I just was like wondering, like, man, with a fully healthy quarterback that can and will throw the ball down the field and give Michael Pittman Jr. more opportunities than just those, 5-6 yard throws to him. Like, how much better is that going to make Michael Pittman, and how much better, frankly, his stats going to look? Because, Derek, when you look at, I was curious because I looked back at the 2021 Colts versus the 2023 Colts just to kind of see the difference in Michael Pittman Jr.'s stats. So 2021 obviously was his first breakout year. He had 88 catches for a little over 1,000 yards, 1,082 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Okay. Last year he had 109 targets. So, 21 more receptions he had than in 2023 than in 2021. But the thing that stands out to me, Derek, is Michael Pittman Jr. almost had 2 less yards per reception. Not quite, but close to almost 2 yards less per reception in 2023 than he had in 2021. And I don't think that's a Michael Pittman thing. I think it's just the fact that the Colts didn't throw the ball down the field. And when they did, they didn't go after Michael Pittman a whole lot. I mean, we saw him in a couple games when they actually threw him the football down the field. Like, he made some big plays. Like, he is a guy that has that ability, like he said, to high point the ball and go make plays. I mean, he's 6'4", so he can do that. We saw him do that at USC. We saw him do that in 2021. So, Michael Pittman Jr. really could, Derek, if the Indianapolis Colts, wanted him to, he really could, I think, start to do some of that, And so I'm curious, if Michael Pittman Jr., Derek, had around the same-ish, yards per reception that he did in 2021, the dude would have had over 1,300 receiving yards. I mean, almost 1,350 at that point. So that goes to show you, Derek, if you actually kind of factor in, him having a quarterback that will semi-target him down the field, he's going to have near 1,400 receiving yards each year if the receptions stay around the same, which I think is definitely very important. And again, only 4 receiving touchdowns, but hey, he wasn't targeted in the red zone hardly at all. So things like that, they matter, right? And so I think Michael Pittman, for what it's worth, he did everything with what he was given, right? He made the catches he was supposed to make, and he made some big plays out of some of those, smaller catches as well. And he made good on the times the Colts did actually throw the ball down the field to him. So definitely looking forward to Michael Pittman Jr. here in Shane Steichen's offense, year number 2, but also with a quarterback. I mean, heck, both quarterbacks now that will actually throw the ball down the field. I think that's definitely a recipe for success for Michael Pittman Jr. And another guy that we think definitely will help as well is Alec Pierce, the wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. Not quite, Derek, the breakout year that we all hoped for Alec Pierce. He had 32 catches for 514 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Far and away had the most yards per reception per game. And it was pretty incredible. Over 16 yards per reception, Derek. So that's definitely great for Alec Pierce. And, everybody is really down on Alec Pierce in a lot of ways. But, Derek, I kind of look at some of those big plays the Colts had last year, some of those plays that kind of changed the course of certain games. And Alec Pierce was right there making plays. So I'm not as low on him, I think, as a lot of people are. I think this kid's got certainly ability. And I think with a healthy Anthony Richardson, similar to Michael Pittman, it's only going to help him, in the limited, receptions and targets he's going to get this year compared to Pittman. It's only going to help him in this Colts offense be more explosive in 2024. Talk to me about Alec Pierce real quick, the Indianapolis Colts wide receiver who was the wide receiver too outside for them the last couple of years. Talk to me about him.
Yeah, so the same prowess that you said with Michael Pittman with yards per catch. One thing that was very interesting is, again, Alec Pierce was improving in areas in which you were hoping he would, despite a lack of targets. So he did play one more game this year than he did in 2022. He had 13 less targets, which resulted in 9 less receptions. But on average, was about a yard and a half more per catch on average than in his rookie year. And despite 9 less catches, still had the same number of touchdowns as he did from his rookie year. So even in spite of having a lack of production his way in regards to targets, still was able to maximize that production more, which is exactly what you want to see from a wide receiver that is your quote-unquote vertical guy. And, Cody, I think now that you have a wide receiver in Adonai Mitchell, I don't see why people have such a disdain for Alec Pierce now. Because you had, even last year, you have a amazing array of talents that you have on this team now. You have Michael Pittman, who is the reception guy. Like, any route you ask him to run, any catch you ask him to make, he will come down with it. Adonai Mitchell is the perfect combination of speed, athleticism, size, and everything. Big play potential is what he has. Josh Downs, he's your route technician. If you need somebody open and get 5 or 6 yards, that's the guy to do it. He's one of them. And then Alec Pierce, who is, he's your gunslinger. Like, go get it. Go down the field, make the big play, because you have the size and the speed to be a matchup nightmare for any corner that faces you. Because there is no 6'3", 210-pound corner out there that's going to be able to keep up with you pace by pace. And I think there's only about a few guys out there that actually could take on that challenge and actually be able to handle what Alec Pierce can provide. And like we said, people can dismiss it all they want, but Alec Pierce, his game is predicated on a quarterback having the ability to throw the football down the field and be aware of him being open down the field. You and I, we talked about it during the season. We talked about it at the end of the season. We talked about it in the offseason. How many times we saw clips of Alec Pierce wide open, nobody even near him, but yet Gardner Minshew either couldn't throw the football to him or or didn't know he was open, right? So that's the issue you come into play here with Alec Pierce. Now, of course, there's always going to be plays, Cody, where there's always man, he was open. Like, I should have hit him. Like, there's always going to be those. But there was a lot of them from 2023. That's the whole point. So I think Alec Pierce has been given and I really don't care if his trademark is the vertical. I really don't care. Like, I mean, if you're telling me that I get a 6'3", 210-pound wide receiver that can catch 40, 50 balls a year, get me near 1,000 yards doing it, get me a couple touchdowns, and is willing to put in all the dirty work and blocking and all of this other stuff, I don't care. That's fine with me. I'm not asking Alec Pierce to be a number 1 wide receiver. I'm asking him to just be a good complement. Just add a piece to this offense. And Alec Pierce does. People just don't accept it or can't see it because it doesn't happen enough for people to understand that this guy can do more. As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
And I think there's this weird bias against Alec Pierce because we know, people know, he had that drop in the preseason, and now there's just these people saying he's a drop prone type of guy. And I'm like, I do not recall last year where Alec Pierce dropped many footballs when it mattered. I do not remember anything in the regular season where Alec Pierce had an issue. And so it's just kind of a weird narrative that people have kind of cracked it in their mind that Alec Pierce is a drop machine, and the dude had, I don't even know, barely any drops last year with the Colts. And so it's just kind of a weird thing, a weird kind of narrative people have kind of built with Alec Pierce. And so I'm hoping this year he can kind of get rid of that narrative in a lot of ways, because frankly, I think it's a lazy narrative and I don't really understand where it comes from. And when it comes to Alec Pierce, I do, but I think it's kind of silly, to be honest with you. So just kind of a weird thing there with Alec Pierce overall. And hopefully here with an actual quarterback that can get him the football, I'm hoping Derek, he had 3 drops last year, 3 drops. Same amount as he had his rookie year. That's not that many in the grand scheme of over 1,000 snaps, that's right. Not that much in terms of 65 targets. You'll take that, that's not too bad. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I just don't really feel like that's warranting, I suppose, some of the criticism, I guess, that Alec Pierce is getting when it comes to the drops, because it just doesn't seem like
I'll tell you what it is.
I'll
tell you what it is. It's the 2022 season effect. The first game of the season, he drops 2 passes, which could have probably both been touchdowns if he holds on to them. Sure. And ever since then, you have a collection of Colts Nation that just refuses to appreciate this guy for what he does. Refuses to do it. From that moment forward, that first game, there were a ton of people that forever will have a tarnished image of Alec Pierce and say, that guy will never be good in my eyes. Never. Yeah. And I hate that it's come to that.
I mean, heck, Eric, last year Josh Downs had more drops than Alec Pierce. We're not talking about Josh Downs in that light. Nobody is. So it's just kind of a weird thing. And he had the same, I know he had less snaps than Pittman, but he had the same amount as Michael Pittman. So it's not like Alec Pierce is out here dropping 8-9 balls per year. That's not what's happening. He dropped 3. He's dropped 6 in the last 2 years combined. That's it. So anyway, when it comes to Alec Pierce, though, I think you're right. And to be fair to him and to be fair to, the Colts, Alec Pierce is not a finished product. He definitely is not a perfect wide receiver. He's got things he's got to work on. Like, he's very, like you said, very much a one-trick pony, so he's got to get better in his route running, in that short to intermediate game. He's got to get better in those departments, and hopefully Reggie Wayne and some of these other wide receivers can help him develop that aspect of his game. But certainly if he's just going to be a vertical threat, I mean, he does that job very, very well. He's got the size, the speed, athleticism, all that stuff to make you feel really good. If you can have a guy that a couple times per game, you can go deep to him, and he's going to make the defense pay. So definitely love that for Alec Pierce. But I already mentioned Josh Downs, so we'll just talk about Josh Downs real quick, Derek. You mentioned he's the route technician, that type of guy, the slot wide receiver for the Colts last year. We know what he did coming in. He broke the Colts receiving record in terms of receptions last year, despite the fact that I felt like the Colts kind of went away from him towards the kind of more the end of the year in certain ways. I know he dealt with that injury as well. But, Josh Downs on the whole, Derek, considering the circumstances, I thought he had a phenomenal rookie season. This is a guy that, we saw what his volume was at North Carolina. They targeted him a ton. And last year, he had 98 targets, for the Colts last year, Derek. So, I mean, a guy that's definitely going to get his when it comes to the target department, and was second on the team in terms of receiving yards last year. So talk to me about Josh Downs here for the Colts and entering year number 2 now, what he could provide for Anthony Richardson and this offense.
Well, Josh Downs has definitely become a fan favorite in Indianapolis. And, it all started when he got drafted and everybody saw that draft reaction video, maybe one of the best draft reaction videos you'll ever see, and hearing just how hyped Reggie Wayne was about Josh Downs and where we got him. There was a lot of hype going around Josh Downs, and then you hear him and Anthony Richardson are hanging out at the team hotels and like throwing the football outside, just like, those feel good moments, it's like there were a lot of feel good moments for Josh Downs before he even stepped foot on a football field. So that really helped with a lot of it. But I mean, his play definitely spoke for itself. There was some bad that came with Josh Downs, and at times, I think he went a little too fast for himself. Sometimes I think he tried to do a little too much, and that kind of hurt with the drop issue, like you said. But there wasn't enough of a drop issue to make you think that this guy wasn't a really good football player. We saw a lot of highlights from Josh Downs this last year and did a lot of great things. The big touchdown against Cleveland, the catch against the New England Patriots that pretty much sealed the game, and then that one again with Anthony Richardson in the game against the Rams. I could keep going on it. I mean, he's a great player. And, you and I got to talk with him at training camp this last year. I mean, he is a completely down-to-earth kid, and he is a great, great player. I can't wait to see how he does. I think the sky's the limit for him. You look at kind of what the NFL's trying to shift to. I mean, the slot wide receivers don't get a lot of talk, but, we've seen it a lot in recent memory. Those slot wide receivers, when they get into a system enough that they feed them enough, they lead the league in receptions, and then all of a sudden everyone's talking about you, right? Saying how elite you are when it comes to that. So, if Josh Downs wants to put his name out there for everyone to know, he's just got to keep doing what he's doing, and I think he's got it.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm excited for what he can do in year 2 now, because we already, like you said, saw, the chemistry that him and AR were developing like from day one. And Josh Downs is a very motivated individual, got that competitive fire, which you love to see, and just excited for him now. What can he do and how can he take his game to the next level here as that primary slot guy for Indy? Last year he really took that role and ran with it. I know him and Isaiah McKenzie were kind of battling for it, but he took it and didn't look back. So definitely excited for Josh Downs in year number 2, what that holds for him and how him and AR can continue to build that chemistry, being, guys that were taken in the same draft class. So really excited for that. But Derek, you got to talk about the guy the Colts just drafted here in the 2024 draft. That is Adonai Mitchell, the wide receiver out of Texas. And Derek, you talked about it earlier. I think you put it pretty well. The perfect combination of size, athleticism, speed, production even. This is a kid that every 5 catches he had last year at Texas resulted in a touchdown. So he definitely has an eye for the big play and the big moments. So definitely excited to have him here in this Indianapolis Colts locker room. And yeah, even though the fact that he was taken in round 2 where he was, a lot of people had him pegged as a potential late first rounder. So Indianapolis definitely got a kid here that's equally, I think, motivated like Josh Downs was last year. Got taken a little bit later than everybody thought, but certainly a kid, Derek, that has all the traits that you're looking for a complete wide receiver, and potentially a kid that has, I think, wide receiver 1 ability. So talk to me about a player like Adonai Mitchell and what he provides for this Colts offense in ways that maybe they didn't have last year.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with Adonai Mitchell, and it's going to be the thing that is going to be looming over him for a while. It is nothing to do with his playing ability. I don't think there's a single person that would tell you that Adonai Mitchell does not have what it takes to be a National Football League wide receiver. He is the prototypical guy that you would want in a wide receiver. The issue you have is the question of, is he going to stay on the straight and narrow with his medications? Is he going to be responsible in that regard to making sure that his health is taken care of? That's the number one thing. Now, obviously, he's getting paid. He's got his daughter around. He's going to have money. He's going to have people around him. He's got resources, a lot more resources now with the NFL that, he can make sure that he is able to bring people into him to make sure that he's able to keep himself on the straight and narrow with that medication and that dieting and whatever it is they're going to do with him to make sure he stays healthy. As long as he stays on that, I have no doubt that Adonai Mitchell can be a great wide receiver for this team moving forward, because he's got everything you want. He's got that contested catch ability. He's able to catch those 50-50 balls. He's able to beat you on the route tree and create separation. He's able to beat you with speed. He has every route running ability that you want. He's got really good hands. I mean, he's got everything, Cody. And I mean, I don't know how teams let this guy fall the way that he did, but I think if Adonai Mitchell can keep his health in order, then there is no doubt in my mind that this guy will definitely be up there with some of the best wide receivers drafted from this class and be an immediate impact player in 2024.
Yeah, I'm excited to see kind of what he provides element-wise that, frankly, the Colts didn't have last year, and kind of some of his abilities and, some of the ways that he's going to be able to attack a defense and the ways that Steichen and, Jim Bob Cooter and all these guys are going to be able to really, scheme him up very well. So excited for that with the pairing of Anthony Richardson. I mean, 2 guys that are off the charts when it comes to athleticism. Adonai Mitchell was very high 9, obviously AR a 10. And heck, Jelani Woods a 10. So you got some very athletic wide receivers and just players on this offense. And Adonai Mitchell is just another guy here that is very athletic, has all the ability in the world, like you mentioned, and excited to see him on the field here for his rookie season. Now, Derek, there are a few other guys. Those are kind of the big four for the Colts. There's a few other guys that we probably need to mention as well for the Colts, because it will be interesting to see kind of how that number 5 and potentially number 6 wide receiver room, kind of those two positions at the back end of the roster kind of work themselves out, because you have a bunch of different guys here on your roster, Derek, and kind of excited to see what it looks like for the Indianapolis Colts with this wide receiver room. I mean, who are we going to talk about first? I mean, you could probably talk about Ashton Dulin, who didn't play a snap last year for the Indianapolis Colts. But, I mean, Derek, he has been a special teams ace for this team for the last number of years. And I think he's a guy, Derek, that showed if he needs to in a pinch, play some snaps. He has some ability as a wide receiver as well. So talk to me about Ashton Dulin, what he kind of provides as presumably that number 5 guy. And obviously we know what he can do on special teams for this team as well.
Yeah, it's going to definitely be interesting. Him and the next guy, Anthony Gold, which we'll talk about here in a second. But you're right. Ashton Dulin's name gets forgotten about because, yeah, he didn't play last year because of the injury. But, I mean, you're right. He is a special teams ace. And, you know, they definitely missed that last year. And like you said, at times, Ashton Dulin has shown he's got enough speed and he's got enough ability to run a few plays on offense here and there. You know, that's something that you need on your team with that wide receiver 5 spot. So I will gladly take it, and I hope that we'll see Ashton Dulin come back healthy. We'll see him be back on special teams doing what he does best, and on top of it, providing a couple, you know, maybe a couple jet sweeps here and there.
Yeah, he's got some speed, man. He does. We don't talk about Ashton Dulin for his speed, but he's got some speed. He showed it in 2021, especially, you know, when called upon. I think it was the Tampa Bay game where he had that big touchdown from Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
So, like, he's got ability. He's got ability. He can burn some guys. So excited to have him back just for the special teams element. And that's obviously a huge factor, is the ability to play special teams, which I think will give players like Ashton Dulin and the next guy we're going to talk about, Anthony Gold, I think a great opportunity to make an impact on this roster, even if they're not, you know, starting or getting snaps on offense. And now, while Ashton Dulin's more of kind of that gunner, you know, Anthony Gold's going to be primarily one of your kick returners. I mean, probably your punt and a kick returner type of guy. I mean, this dude's got blazing speed. I mean, he's athletic, like we talked about. He was one of the best returners in college football over the last couple of years. So I think that certainly gives him an advantage, Derek, is if he can be one of the better, you know, kick/punt returners in the NFL, that's going to give him a lot of opportunities, especially considering, you know, some of the other guys that have in the last couple of years have handled some of those duties, either are not on the roster anymore or are taking on more serious roles. Like, for example, Dallas Flowers. You know, he might be competing for that number 2 outside spot at corner. So he might see some serious time, and he might not, you know, be able to kind of do that. Josh Downs, same deal there. I know he did a little bit last year with that. So, like, I think the opportunity is certainly there for a guy like Anthony Gold to step in and be that primary guy on both those teams very early on.
Absolutely. I mean, like as we saw in the last 2 years at Oregon State for Anthony Gold, 20 punt returns for 360 yards. I mean, that's insanely good, and 2 touchdowns on some of those returns. So, I mean, no doubt Anthony Gold is lightning in a bottle. I mean, this guy definitely has that quick, agile ability to just get around people. And you know, with that 4.4 speed, I mean, there's just nothing that this guy can't do. He is the perfect return man, and I fully expect that the Indianapolis Colts will look for that to be his primary role. But, I mean, again, don't sit on this guy not being able to catch a few balls. The last 2 seasons as well for Anthony Gold has had 70 receptions, 1,200 yards. So, I mean, when you talk about what this guy can do, I mean, he has production there as well. Averages 16.5 yards a catch. I mean, Anthony Gold has some really great aspects to his game. Now, you know, again, people asking, you know, what competition is he facing? But I would argue again that Anthony Gold also was playing with subpar quarterback play as well, because I look at every highlight that Anthony Gold has on offense, and the ball's either thrown insanely short or thrown insanely long. And that reminds me very much of Alec Pierce when he was coming out of Cincinnati with Desmond Ridder as his quarterback. So, I mean, again, the context of that very much matters. But for a guy to be able to have 70 catches for 1,200 yards, and we're not even talking about that being the best part of his game, because it's not. I mean, and that's crazy to think about. So it will definitely be fun. I mean, if you're the Colts, right, you have to keep 6 wide receivers on this roster, right?
I mean, yeah.
I feel like you have to.
Right, 2 guys that will make an impact on special teams, no doubt about it. So, I mean, I think definitely you have to keep 6. I think we pretty clearly know who those 6 are. Like, this isn't something in the past where it's like a toss-up. Like, I truly believe, like, if these guys fill those roles the way we expect them to, it's not going to be really much of a competition. I mean, obviously they got to go out there and prove it, and that will be a factor. But I mean, on paper, you look at it, you're like, I feel very comfortable with predicting Doolin and Anthony Gold as 5 and 6. I feel pretty comfortable about that. And then when you look at the other wide receivers on the roster, like, DJ Montgomery, Juwan Winfrey, some of those other players. I know they have Xavier White out of Texas Tech. Like, none of those guys probably play much special teams. And if they do, certainly not probably at the level or have the ability that either of these 2 players do at the NFL level. So I don't really think any of the other guys maybe challenge. They're probably more practice squad guys at this point for the Colts. But definitely excited, man, because not only is this wide receiver class or this wide receiver room for the Colts very diverse in their skill sets, but they're also very young and very deep. And I think that is definitely a very, very good thing to have, if you're the Colts. Like, you got guys like Doolin and potentially Anthony Gold, who, they probably won't see the field offensively or very rarely, but if they need to, they can step it up and they can play a role in the offense in certain spurts. So I'm really looking forward to this wide receiver class, man, for the Colts and this unit as a whole, because while there's not, necessarily a Justin Jefferson or a CeeDee Lamb currently on this team where it stands right now in this wide receiver room, I think there's a lot of potential in this room overall. You got a lot of players with a lot higher ceilings than I think a lot of people are thinking about. And so I'm really looking forward to that for the Indianapolis Colts. But guys, let us know your thoughts here on the wide receiver room for the Colts. That'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, guys, go Colts.